Did you know some people used to think houseplants made you invisible? That's the kind of stuff we're looking at in today's video. It turns out the lore behind certain plants goes so far back and is so deep and so just kind of confusing. Like, where did this come from? But it's so fun. And I caught myself giggling a couple times at the stuff that I read about and wrote down for today's video. So I'm really excited. We're going to be talking about 5 plant myths that you didn't know about. The title is probably a different wording than that, but that's where we're starting. And the link from plants to Greek mythology is so strong. It's way more intertwined than I ever thought it was. And so I just had so much fun putting together this video and this script, and I guess let's just get right into it, okay? So the first plant we're talking about is ferns. The fern is the actual plant that people used to think made you invisible. How fun is that? And basically, this myth came from fern seeds being believed to confer invisibility because they were so small. You couldn't see fern seeds. And so people were like, oh, so obviously, since we can't see them, that means they're invisible. And that means if we carry them, then we'll be invisible. And there's even a reference to this in Shakespeare's Henry V production, where they're talking about going to steal stuff from the castle. And one guy is like, don't worry, we have fern seeds. So we'll be invisible. They'll never know we're in there. We can steal no problem. It'll be easy. So all the way back in the 1600s, 1500s, the 16th century, if you walked with a fern seed, you were invisible. So there was only one way to successfully collect these fern seeds, and it was actually quite extensive, and this made me giggle just thinking of people doing this. But the only time you could collect them was at midnight on St. John's Eve, or Midsummer's Night Eve, June 23rd. This was the exact moment that these seeds would fall from the plant. You could catch it by stacking 12 pewter plates beneath a fern leaf. The seed would fall through the first 11 plates and be stopped by the 12th. If you came up empty-handed, it was because goblins and fairies, which were allowed to roam freely that one night of the year, had snatched the seed as it fell. So if you weren't lucky enough to catch one of these invisible seeds, you had fairies and goblins to blame. Because apparently this was the only night they could roam freely. So you better be careful. It's not easy to get one of these invisibility seeds. And this thought process was really widespread during the 16th century. It was just accepted. People didn't understand how these fern plants were reproducing and recreating themselves and spreading if there weren't any physical seeds to be seen. And a quote from one of the articles I was reading says that if you held the fern seed, you walked invisible. That's from the University of Oklahoma. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. I was curious, like, so how do ferns reproduce if it's not by seed? And I found this little graph guide thingy that kind of goes into it, but basically it's a spore on the fern that gets fertilized, and it's basically, I'm doing such a bad job at explaining this. I'm acting like I know, but I'm literally just trying to recall information. It's basically like a new plant literally just starts growing out of the leaf, out of one of the spores. So there is no seed. Moral of the story. There is no seed. So, plant number 2 that we are going to be talking about is basil plant. And this was the most fun one for me to research. So much stuff came up. There is so much basil plant lore that, I had one myth in mind that I was looking for information on, and I ended up just finding so much more good stuff, so I just had to include all of it. But one thing about basil is that it is used still in witchcraft for love, prosperity, and wealth. So you can find recipes that include basil to like make a love spell using this plant, make some kind of potion to eat. You want basil plant. It's a really popular herb to use in witchcraft. Another one that I thought was really interesting, a fun myth, was you had to handle basil carefully because you could accidentally create scorpions if you mishandled the basil. Yeah, so If you leave a single basil leaf under a pot by accident, it was believed that that single basil leaf would turn into a scorpion, and then you would have a scorpion problem on your hands. So any basil leaf left hanging around would become scorpions. And I mean, obviously we know that's not true, but it's just fun. It was just a fun myth of the time. And so they were very adamant about like being careful when you handle basil. Some more basil plant lore goes as far as including a half dragon, half lizard mythical creature with a with a deadly gaze that only the basil could cure, as well as this mythical creature also had deadly breath and a deadly bite, and basil is the only cure. And the name of this mythical creature is actually called the basilisk or the basilisk. I'm not sure how to pronounce that, but it is believed that this is where basil got its name from, because basilisk, basil, you see what I'm saying? So I thought that was so interesting. Like, who knew researching basil would lead to a half dragon, half lizard with a deadly stare? So fun. But it doesn't end there. Basil was also a symbol of hatred for ancient Romans, but a token of love for Italy. And Romanian traditions link basil to love and marriage rituals. For example, if a boy accepted a basil sprig from a girl, then that meant that they were engaged to be married. And also, if a girl puts a basil, is it a leaf? If a girl puts basil under her pillow at night, then she will have dreams of her future lover. So lots of love associated with basil. I was tempted to try. I was like, am I gonna put some basil under my pillow tonight and see what kind of dreams I have? I'm a dreamer girl. I love dreams. I pay attention to dreams and think they have significant meaning. And yeah, so I was like, maybe I should try this. But I am currently in a relationship, so I was like, do I need to be dreaming about a future lover? Would I dream about my current lover? I don't know. So I ended up not going with that experiment, but maybe give it a try and let me know how it goes. I'd love to know. Oh, and another fun fact is that who was it? Greek and Romans believed that in order to get a more potent basil plant, that you could swear and rant while sowing it. So as you're putting the little basil seeds in the ground, go on a rant and swear a bunch, and you'll have an excellent, highly potent basil plant. How fun is that? And the article that I was reading that said this had such a funny thing to say about it. It said, this will give you an excuse if you misbehave while planting your herb garden. Misbehave. I just thought that was so funny. Like, I don't know. Misbehave by swearing and ranting. So, I mean, lesson, not all of plant care and plant chores has to be peaceful and cozy. You can swear and rant and get excellent fruits of that labor. So I don't know, maybe someone out there needed to hear that. The next plant we are going to be talking about is peonies, and I love peonies. They're so cute. They're believed to emanate the moon's energy, protecting crops, flocks, and homes from evil. Certain collection rituals would warn against plucking peonies during the day, because if you were caught by a woodpecker or a woodpecker saw you plucking the peony, it would pluck your eyes out. So if you're gonna pluck a peony, only do it at night. Don't let the woodpecker see you if you don't want to lose your sight. That just rhymed, and that was unintentional. Is there a rhyme out there about this? There has to be like some folklore peony woodpecker rhyme. Another fun little myth or folklore thing about peonies is that if you counted the petals of the peonies and ended up with an odd number of petals, then, okay, well, maybe this one isn't so fun, but it was said to be a symbol of future death or misfortune. So maybe a not so fun fact, but along those lines, if you gifted someone a peony, it was also meant as a foretelling of future death in the family. So if someone is giving you a peony, maybe don't accept it. Maybe say, you know what, I'm good. No thanks. And it was also believed to be an antidote for all illnesses that came from demonic possession. And the illness that it listed as an example of one of the curable diseases was epilepsy. So if you have epilepsy, I mean, do I even need to say it? Anyways, number 4 is coconuts. I know coconuts aren't technically a houseplant. I know some of these aren't technically houseplants. Maybe the majority. Basil, I have basil. Peonies are outside. Ferns are a houseplant. Venus flytraps houseplant. Okay, so coconuts, I know they're not technically a houseplant, but I thought this myth was so fun that I had never heard it before, so I wanted to share. But basically, a coconut resembles a human head. It's got the eyes and the mouth, and the husky bits of it is like the hair. And even if you cut into a coconut while the inside is green, I guess it resembles a human brain. So there's a story that kind of explains how a human head ended up as coconuts. And that story is a certain philosopher in India in past ages was in the service of one of the kings and was held by him in high esteem. The king had a vizier. The philosopher said to the king, "If this vizier's head is cut off and buried, this will bring advantage to the people of India and other peoples in the world." The king said to him, "And what if this that you have stated does not come from the head of the vizier?" "Is it vizier? Vizier?" He replied, "If it does not, do with my head as you have done with his." So the king gave orders to cut off the vizier's head, and the philosopher took it, planted a date seed in his head, and tended it until it grew into a tree and produced this nut as its fruit. So they put a date in a guy's head, buried it, tended to it as if it were a plant, and it grew into a tree producing coconuts. Obviously, that isn't actually what happened. Maybe it's not so obvious. But yeah, so that's where the myth comes from, that coconuts are actually just human heads. And finally, we have Venus flytraps. Popular lore and fiction often depict Venus flytraps as monstrous plants capable of eating humans. So that's the myth. Can Venus flytraps eat humans? And actually, as I was trying to research for this, I came across some Reddit posts that were like, if I stick my finger in my Venus flytrap, will it start to dissolve? And honestly, same. If you could see my Google history, like, it's not far off from that. I didn't read the answers, honestly. I didn't, but because I was like, well, that's not really what I'm looking for. But anyways, I thought that was funny. In reality, though, Venus flytraps are just small plants, and they trap insects for nutrients, not people. Don't worry, the Venus flytrap is not going to eat a human. And we see exaggerations of this in pop culture. For example, the Little Shop of Horrors. And these pop culture references have really fueled this myth, or more so misconception about Venus flytraps, that they can be huge and eat humans instead of just like small little bugs. This was so fun. There's so many more myths out there too that I almost put in this video, but I figured we would keep it to five different plants. And if you like this video, let me know. I'll make another one with some more myths. I would love to dive deeper into that basil monster, to be honest. I think that would be really interesting. There's a lot more to it that I didn't include. If you liked this video, you're gonna love the last one I did, where we explore the racist history of houseplants. The support that I have gotten on that video has truly been amazing. Thank you so much to everyone that left a thoughtful comment. And that's gonna be it for this video. Thank you guys so much for being here, and I'll see you next time.